Hello friends, it's me, and today let's watch the entire history of Goth fashion style theory from the style theorists. Together, let's go, let's start. Thank you.
Halloween might be over, but according to Gen Z, the Goths are here to stay. Over the past year, TikTok has really embraced its dark side. But did you know that Goth didn't start with Hot Topic and alt music? Instead, the answer goes back nearly 2,000 years.
Wow!
Hello Internet, welcome to Style Theory, the show that knows that it's not just a phase, Mom. Ugh, you just don't get me.
Hello Internet, welcome to Style Theory. And I absolutely agree with Amy. It's not just a phase. Parents, Papa, Mommy, Daddy, please learn. In this day and age, there's something called the internet, that is televisions. Ask about it. Learn. Learn for the sake of your children's. Understand from their point of view. Thank you.
Goth, emo, e-girl, punk, each generation has had their moment with alternative stylings, and right now Gen Z is loving the black. Whether it's because of new media like Wednesday on Netflix or people just looking for a new way to express themselves, people are embracing their inner goth. But this has caused some discourse online about whether or not Gen Z should be able to consider themselves real goths. We hate to see it, but here's the thing. Whether you're a new goth or an old goth, you are all wrong. Just wait a second and hear me out. Whether you like to channel the Adams aesthetic or take your inspiration from Gothic architecture, the truth of what makes goth, well, goth, is actually a lot more complicated. This has become my Roman Empire, and I mean that literally. This dates back to the Roman Empire. So grab your black lipstick and your Germanic capes, because we are about to find out what it means to be a real goth, and settle the debate about whether or not Gen Z can actually lay claim to the name.
The OG.
Here's a question. You find yourself alone in a dark alley. Do you choose the goth or the bear? Well, what about a gothic barbarian? The beginning of our gothic story takes us all the way back.
Alright,
Like way back to the first couple centuries CE. This was the twilight, not that twilight, years of the Roman Empire, when it was still spread all across the Mediterranean. But just north of the empire, there were various independent tribes rebelling against Roman rule. Among these tribes of barbarians, as the Romans like to call them, were people such as the Vandals, the Angles, and of course, a little group known as the Goths. Now, I know I seem like I'm all about that goth life, but can I tell you a secret? I actually really love the looks from the 1920s. Listen, if I thought I could rock a drop waist and pin curls all year long, I totally would. Goth just tends to fit me better. And because goth tends to just fit my vibe, I instead turn to games like June's Journey to help me get my historical fashion fix. Which is why I am so excited that they have returned as a sponsor for today's episode. June's Journey is a puzzle game that puts you in the shoes of June, the amateur detective who's trying to solve the mystery around her sister's death. Now, that may sound dark, but this is actually a very cute game. So whether you love curling up with some tea and a cozy game, or love trying to solve an intriguing mystery, this is the game you need to be playing. You'll uncover clues towards the unfolding story by examining unique and beautiful artwork and finding hidden objects. And don't worry, you will never run out of new things to do, because the team behind the game is constantly adding new content with their seasonal events, new unique rewards for you to collect, and for you fashion lovers out there, you can even unlock new outfits. So what are you waiting for? Get started on your journey by scanning the QR code on screen or clicking the link in the description to start downloading the game right now for free. June's Journey is available on iOS, Android, and PC. So yeah, you have no excuse to be missing out on all the fun. So click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen now to get started playing June's Journey. Now the goths from
thank you so much for supporting this episode from the Style Theorist. Thank you so much. Let's continue.
Around the time of the Roman Empire are not the skinny jean wearing, eyeliner loving goths that we know today, though the idea might not actually be that far off. Unfortunately, most of what we could know about these early goths has been lost to time, and what we do know is through the lens of the Romans, who weren't exactly the biggest fans of the OG goths. Like, calling them barbarians. It's not nice. But based on what we do know about what other tribes in the area would have worn, Goths were likely rocking one very scandalous item: pants. Wait, what? Well, to the toga and tunic wearing Romans, the idea of pants was scandalous and, of course, barbaric. Northern tribes, including the Goths, likely wore pants similar to this. These are known as Thorsberg trousers, named for the town in which a pair was discovered. These pants would have been made of wool and they had little attached socks like dance tights! Can you imagine wearing these to your next emo night rave because they are the most historically accurate? Iconic, I can't. But due to this and their several centuries worth of conflict with the Roman Empire, Romans really started to see wearing pants as uncivilized. In fact, their disdain for pants was so strong, during the reign of Emperor Honorius, he put out a decree that said this: within this venerable city, no person should be allowed to appropriate to himself the use of boots or trousers. And the Goths were all like, first you came for my pants, and now you're coming for my boots? Those are fighting words. Over the centuries, Goths and Romans continued to butt heads and fists.
Sad news for the Romans. Pants won. Standardized is pants for both male and female genders alike, globally.
10 CE, Gothic King Alaric I sacked the city of Rome, which many consider to be the beginning of the end for the Western Roman Empire. It would officially fall just a few decades later. The collapse of Rome not only ended Rome's 1,000-year reign, but it ushered in a new era of history, one that you might have heard of. Nowadays, we tend to refer to this period of time as the Dark Ages. Yeah, the Goths were partially responsible for bringing about the Dark Ages, which so on brand. And you bet that those Goths took over the remains of the Roman Empire faster than a spirit Halloween. Gothic kingdoms like the Visigoths in modern-day Spain and France and the Ostrogoths in modern-day Italy sprang up in the wake of Rome's fall. And so did a new sense of style. While Romans were described as wearing long, white silk tunics, the Visigoths, for example, were said to have worn multicolored and embellished tunics that ended just above the knee. These were then paired with tall furred boots and capes. And it wasn't just their clothes. Hair was also a huge part of Goth culture, as it always is. Goth men and women alike would have kept their hair long, oftentimes using it to cover their ears with thick braids. In fact, hair was so important to Gothic culture that cutting someone's hair was the ultimate sign of disrespect. Remember, always get consent before cutting someone's hair. And just like the Goths of today, accessorizing was extremely important. Many pieces of Gothic jewelry have been discovered over the centuries, including highly elaborate brooches for fastening cloaks and tunics together, as well as very elaborate belt buckles. No, I'm not kidding.
Wow.
Almost every single source that I used in researching this episode mentioned how Goths wore intricate belt buckles laced with glass and stone.
Wow.
Which, if you think about it, is not too different from the Gothic fixation on belts today, with many modern Goths wearing multiple belts, studded belts, and the occasional seatbelt belt. However, all good things must eventually come to an end. And by 500 to 700...
Case in point, much respect to those... Wow. That is artistic, I suppose.
CE, the Goths were well on their way out. Now this should have been where Goth just died out, but where the people were gone, the term lived on. All thanks to one very critical Renaissance hipster. If you were paying attention earlier, you'll remember that the fall of the Western Roman Empire and the subsequent rise of the Goths was the start of the Dark Ages. But they weren't called the Dark Ages due to a dark sense of fashion. It was all down to the loss of information. Much of the information and technological advancements made by the Roman Empire was considered to be lost, especially those in the area of architecture. This style included arches, vaulted ceilings, columns, that sort of thing. Instead, what emerged was a totally new style of architecture, one that emphasized large stained glass windows, pointed arches, and flying buttresses. Which, no, does not have anything to do with a person's, assets. A buttress is a
Come on, let's keep this wholesome, friendly. Thank you.
of architecture that helps support a building to keep it from collapsing. At the time, this style of building design went by many names, such as French, German, modern, or even New Work. But not, as you might have guessed, Gothic. By this time, the Goths had been long gone for centuries, or at least they were, until the Renaissance, when Italian painter Giorgio Vasari came along. The Renaissance, or rebirth, was a time where scientists and artists alike rediscovered and became obsessed with the culture of the now ancient Greeks and Romans. AKA they preferred the old school stylings over the modern. Kind of like a hipster. This included Vasari, who really loved the classical symmetrical look of Roman architecture, and equally didn't like the look of modern architecture, which he considered ugly and, well, barbaric. And so he gave it the insulting name of Gothic. And while he meant for that term to be an insult to current popular stylings, it stuck. And to this day, we refer to the art, the architecture, and even the entire time period as the Gothic period. Yeah, the dude was trying to drag the Goths, and in trying to do that, he instead made sure that they lived on forever. Talk about being the world's worst hater. While the people of the time probably wouldn't consider themselves Goths, they are by our historical standards. And so we need to take a look at what they were wearing, which is a little tough because we're talking about a 400-year time span across an entire continent. But in general, out were the baggy tunics of the past, and in were tighter form-fitting garments. Women, regardless of their social status, would wear a long linen garment called a chemise as a bottom layer. This underdress typically went past the knees and had sleeves that went past the elbows, with a sometimes low and wide neckline. Over top the chemise, women would wear one or more cotardis, which were long garments that were fitted around the bodice using string. Or the new kid on the block that was gaining all the attention, buttons. Commoner men would also wear variations of the coat, while the upper class, especially the ones in the later Gothic Middle Ages, would begin to wear a thing called doublets. These were fitted garments made of 2 layers that also cinched via strings and buttons. Also during this time period, the church started to have more and more influence over the day-to-day lives and clothes of regular people. Unmarried women would also start to wear their hair down, but they would then cover their hair with a veil once they got married. Men, on the other hand, would typically cut their hair into a bob-like style. During this time, heavy makeup was considered heavily frowned upon, and so the ladies had to improvise. Women of the time would whip up mixtures of roots and berries to make a makeshift lipstick and rouge to add a little bit of natural color. Without being too obvious, you added a little something something. While at the same time, Gothic men were free to dye their hair. Yep, but it was not the black Gothic hair that you might be thinking. Instead, these men were going blonde. Again, this time period was only called Gothic retroactively, and by people who didn't mean it as a compliment. And while living through the Black Death does sound very goth, it wasn't quite a fun time to be alive. But that didn't stop the people of the future from looking back at ye old Goths and going, oh my god, super cool. Fast forward to the late 1700s, and those Gothic buildings that were once considered new and hot are now just so old school. But that didn't stop people from being enamored with this retro style, even trying to bring it back and sparking what is now known as the Gothic revival. But it wasn't just the builders who were loving this renewed interest in all things Gothic. The writers were also getting in on it. Part of the wider Romanticism movement, which broadly celebrated the intricate details of nature, a new genre of literature was born: the Gothic novel. Gothic novels preyed on the reader's fear, contained supernatural or paranormal events, and were often set in abandoned castles. For all you book talkers in the audience, consider this almost a predecessor to your modern-day horror like Stephen Graham Jones or your dark academia.
I like it that Amy is able to pull in like historical facts and then it's like pull up. Hey guys, it's similar to what modern days reference, then put back to historical facts. It's like, thank you so much for relating it to the casual audiences. Thank you so much.
First of these Gothic novels was a 1764 book by Horace Walpole called The Castle of Otranto, later with the added subtitle of A Gothic Story, which Walpole decided to write after having a nightmare in his castle that was done in the style of Gothic revival. The Gothic genre would continue to evolve thanks to the work of some very talented female authors, such as Anne Radcliffe, Mary Shelley, and the Bronte sisters. Gothic novels would remain popular throughout the Victorian era, so much so that the idea of Victorian and Goth sort of became intermixed, even inspiring the idea of Victorian Goths today. In fact, many of the traits that we now associate with Goths, like pale skin and dark clothes, owe a lot to the horrors happening outside of the pages. You see, between the disease and the industrial accidents and the contaminated water, the Victorian era was just kind of a sucky place to live. Not only were childhood death rates still extremely high, there was an increasing percentage of women becoming widows. And becoming a widow was its own kind of fashion statement. At the time, it was customary for grieving widows to wear what was known as a mourning dress. These were all black gowns, complete with veils, hats, and even every vampire's favorite daytime accessory, the parasol. But it wasn't just the everyday woman wearing mourning attire during the Victorian era. The Queen herself embraced her dark side. After the death of her husband in 1861, Queen Victoria herself began to wear mourning attire and made the guests at her home do the same. And this wasn't just for the 2 years that was customary for women at the time. The Queen wore these all-black fits for the final 40 years of her life. And as you can imagine, once the Queen does it, it's gonna get pretty popular. So popular.
Yeah, when everybody is wearing black for a long, significant period of decades, well, it just become the norm. It just become the normal, regular, common thing to do.
Popular, in fact, that it turned from mourning attire to an entire fashion movement. I mean, here's a page out of the December 1901 issue of Vogue. And yes, I do mean that Vogue.
Oh.
This page depicts mourning attire as an actual fashion piece. And then there was the makeup. You know that expression that beauty is pain? Well, the Victorian era really embraced that aesthetic. One of the popular makeup styles at the time aimed for an extremely pale complexion paired with rouged cheeks. Do you want to know why this look was so in fashion? Do you? Well, it's because everyone was trying to achieve that gorgeous tuberculosis. Oh my God, John Green was right. Everything is tuberculosis. And speaking of death, many of the cosmetics of the time were actually...
Okay, so if you don't know what is tuberculosis, it is a very sad disease. People die from it. A lot of people die from it. A lot.
Pretty deadly. Many makeup products at the time contained toxic ingredients such as lead, arsenic, radium, and even belladonna. Yeah, there's a reason it's called deadly nightshade. Now, fast forward all the way to the 20th century.
There's a reason why in our current day and age we stopped using it, because it has taken so many innocent lives. Yeah, it's like... Can you imagine the shirt that you're wearing is killing you, or the spoon that you're using is killing you? It's like, it's a common use item that you have never expected to GG you.
The Gothic novels of the past were now being adapted for the silver screen, a movement which cemented a brand new term, the horror goth. You had movie stars like Lucille Lund and Theda Bara alongside stage actresses like Sarah Bernhardt. Listen, she may not be a movie star, but if you are a fan of all things goth, you need to know Sarah Bernhardt. Bernhardt was famous for wearing stuffed bats in her hair, sleeping in coffins, and she even kept all sorts of wild animals at her house, including but not limited to cheetahs, monkeys, and an alligator named Ali Gaga. You know who also does that? Modern goth icons like Morticia and Wednesday Addams. So far on our journey, we've seen the terms goth and gothic take inspiration from multiple different sources: history, art, architecture, literature, and now even film and TV. The original Addams Family television show premiered in 1964, bringing their unique take on family values and fashion ensembles into homes everywhere. But the creepy couture didn't really start to hit the mainstream until a few years later. Let me set the scene. It's 1967. A music critic named John Stickney has been assigned the task of reviewing this new rock band that seems to have been gaining a very big following. The room is dark, and the lead singer comes in dressed all in black and leather. And they're singing about things that are malevolent, satanic, electric, and on fire. This was The Doors and their lead singer Jim Morrison, who all would go on to become the face of a new wave of music called Gothic rock. Goth was no longer just a term for a historical tribe or an old school architecture. It was a genre. A genre that also included bands like the Velvet Underground, as well as vocalists like David Bowie and Iggy Pop. But while these bands don't quite look like the goths that we know today, by the 80s, that was all about to change. The Cure to The Damned, the OG Susie Sue, they all were standardizing the look and sound of what it meant to be goth. While the leather jacket of Jim Morrison still stuck around, the goth look also began to incorporate things like big hair and dark smoky eyeshadow. And by the time the 90s rolled around, things like the miniskirt, skinny jeans, and black lipstick were also popular with the growing subculture. This is what many consider the birth of the classic goth, and where the debate about what makes a real goth starts to enter the chat.
Yep, that's when people start to become people, I guess. When there's people, there will be conflicts.
2000s, colors like red and green had also entered into their goth era, and the once unified look began to branch out into more niche aesthetics. Some goths wore their eyebrows very thin and stylized, while others just shaved them off. And then you had the mall goth. As goth culture became more popular and more mainstream, the fashion industry had to find a way to cash in. Stores like Hot Topic, who catered to the goth, emo, and punk scenes, began to reach peak popularity in shopping malls all across the country. And with the rise of the internet, more and more niches started to emerge. Ones that all had a different presentation of what goth should look like. You have pastel goth, Lolita goth, cyber goth, Victorian goth, e-girls, e-boys, emos, punk, and those are only the tip of the goth fashion iceberg. But are these new wave aesthetics actually goth? Well, that actually takes us all the way back to Gen Z and the question that started this whole episode. What exactly counts as real goth? As we've seen throughout this episode and throughout goth's almost 2,000 years of history, there is no right way to dress like a goth. And that is because goth hasn't been just about one group. It's been about the evolution of an idea. Rebellion! The original goths helped collapse an empire that oppressed them. Their architecture changed the literal landscape of history. And gothic novelists went against the mainstream, not just by letting more women have a voice, but by using supernatural and the macabre to examine the flaws of humanity. And even if we just look at the history of goth in a modern sense, that idea still holds true. Goth rock was a counter to bands like the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. The Addams Family, who was literally made to be an opposing example of the nuclear family, showcased a loving, albeit spooky, way of life. With each new generation of goth, the looks and the makeup and the vibes all changed. Goth, both the aesthetic and the lifestyle, has always—
Amy makes a very good point. Change is quite inevitable for cultures to change and keep up with the times. Unless it doesn't, and it just fades away into history, and it doesn't get passed on to the next generations.
It's been about evolution. So if you're out there taking the traditional rules of goth fashion and adding your own spin, well, I don't think there's anything more goth than that. But hey, that's just a theory. A style theory. Keep looking sharp. Next time on Style Theory. Can someone tell me when Halloween went from this to this? E2, oh well. To find out how Halloween got so hot, we need to expose some haunted history.
But hey, that's just a theory. A style theory! Keep looking sharp. Thank you so much for the team behind these videos. You guys did a great job. Thank you so much. Much respect for the hard work and research into it. Thank you. Subscribe. Okay, bye. Thank you.